The Gallic Wars. The Gallic Wars took place from 58 to 50 BC and were led by none other than Julius Caesar. Yep, the same Julius Caesar who later became dictator and got famously stabbed by his buddies. But before all of that drama, he was busy conquering Gaul, which is in modern-day France and Belgium. So why did Caesar decide to invade Gaul? Well, it wasn't just for fun. The Romans were worried about the Gallic tribes. They were pretty powerful and could pose a threat to Rome. Plus, Caesar wanted to boost his own political career, nothing like a good war to get your name in the history books, right? The Gallic Wars were brutal. Caesar's legions faced off against a confederation of Gallic tribes led by a guy named Vercingetorix. Now, Vercingetorix was no pushover. He united the tribes and gave the Romans a serious run for their money. One of the most famous battles of the Gallic Wars was the Siege of Alesia in 52 BC. Vercingetorix and his forces were holed up in a fortified town. Caesar built a massive wall around the town to trap them inside and another wall to keep reinforcements out. The siege was intense. Both sides suffered heavy casualties, but in the end, Caesar's strategy worked. Vercingetorix surrendered and Gaul was brought under Roman control. It was a turning point in history, cementing Caesar's power and expanding the then Roman Republic. Estimates suggest that around 1 million people died during the Gallic Wars, that being soldiers and civilians combined. The destruction was massive, and the impact on local populations was devastating. The Gallic Wars weren't just about battles and conquest, though. They also brought about a significant cultural change in the region. The Romans imposed their languages, law, and customs on the conquered territories, which influenced the region for centuries to come. The Reconquista. Rather than just being one large continuous war, the Reconquista was a series of wars that lasted for 781 years, from 711 AD to 1492 AD. It was basically a really long tug of war between the Christian kingdoms in the north and the Muslim wars who had taken over much of southern Iberian Peninsula in the south, which we know today as Spain and Portugal. It all began in the year 711 when Muslim forces from northern Africa called the Moors invaded the Iberian Peninsula and quickly took control of most of the region. This didn't sit well with the Christian kingdoms in the north, who decided to fight back and reclaim their land, hence the name Reconquista, which literally means reconquest. The Reconquista was marked by numerous battles, sieges, shifting alliances, and campaigns over the 781-year period. One of the most significant events was the Battle of Covadonga in 722, which is often considered to be the first victory for the Christian forces against the Moors. Fast forward a few centuries and we get to some of the most famous figures at the Reconquista, like El Cid. El Cid was a legendary Spanish knight whose real name was Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar. He fought for both Christian and Muslim leaders during his lifetime, showing just how complex the conflict really was. One of the major turning points came in 1212 with the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa. The Christian coalition achieved a decisive victory, significantly weakening the Muslims' hold on the peninsula. This victory paved the way for further Christian advances into the south. The final nail in the coffin for the Muslims came in the late 15th century with the Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella. They launched a campaign against the last remaining Muslim stronghold in the Kingdom of Granada. In 1492, Granada fell and the Reconquista was complete. The Reconquista is estimated to have killed at least 7 million people from battles, sieges, and the harsh conditions of medieval warfare. Entire populations were displaced and the cultural landscape of the Iberian Peninsula would forever be changed. The Arab-Byzantine Wars. Like the Reconquista, the Arab-Byzantine Wars were a series of wars that spanned several centuries, roughly from the 7th to the 11th century AD. This epic clash saw the mighty Byzantine Empire facing off against the rapidly expanding Islamic caliphates to its south and east. It was a fight for the control of the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East. The conflict kicked off in the 630s, soon after the rise of Islam. The Byzantine Empire, which was the continuation of the Roman Empire, or simply the Eastern Roman Empire, was already weakened from years of war with the Sasanian Persian Empire. This gave the newly united Arab tribes under the banner of Islam an opportunity to expand. The early stages of the war were incredibly fast-paced. The Muslim armies, inspired by their new faith, rapidly conquered large swaths of territory, including the vital Byzantine provinces of Syria and Egypt. Major cities like Damascus and Alexandria fell to the Arabs. One of the most significant battles was the Battle of Yarmouk in 636. The Muslim forces led by Khalid ibn al-Walid decisively defeated the Byzantines. This battle is often considered to be a major turning point that led to the permanent loss of the Levantine area for the Byzantine Empire. But these wars weren't just fought on land. There were numerous naval engagements as well. The Byzantines had a powerful navy and managed to hold off several Muslim sieges of Constantinople, their capital. The most famous of these was the first Arab siege of Constantinople from 674 to 678. The Byzantines used a secret weapon called Greek fire, a kind of ancient flamethrower to defend their city. In general, the Arab-Byzantine Wars were characterized by a back-and-forth struggle. The Byzantines under emperors like Leo III managed to recover some of the lost territories and even went on the offensive at times. However, the overall trend was the gradual loss of Byzantine territory to the Arabs. The prolonged conflict had an enormous impact on both civilizations though. The Byzantines, though diminished, managed to survive and even thrive in some areas, preserving and transmitting classical knowledge to the future. On the other hand, the Islamic world saw incredible expansion in the flourishing of science, culture, and trade, influenced in part by the interactions with the Byzantine lands. The Arab-Byzantine Wars were considered to be quite deadly due to the constant warfare over the centuries, which led to immense loss of life, the destruction of cities, and disruption of societies. Millions of people were affected as empires clashed in their bid for dominance, with the estimates being as high as 2 million people lost. The French Wars of Religion. Like the two previous entries on the list, the French Wars of Religion were a series of conflicts that took place in France from 1562 to 1598. These wars were primarily fought between the French Catholics and the Protestant Huguenots. But as with most historical conflicts involving religion, it was more to it than just religion. Politics and power plays were deeply intertwined within the conflict as well. The tension between the Catholics and the Protestants had been building up for a while. Protestantism had been spreading like wildfire across Europe, and France was no exception. The Huguenots, the French Protestants, inspired by the teachings of Jean Calvin, were gaining influence, and this didn't sit well with the Catholic majority in France, and things eventually boiled over into violence. The first major outbreak of violence happened in 1562 with the Massacre of Vassy. Catholic forces attacked a group of Huguenots worshipping in a barn, killing many and igniting the first of several wars. This massacre set off a chain reaction of retaliation and further conflict. Over the next few decades, France was engulfed in a series of brutal wars. Cities were besieged, and atrocities were committed by both sides. One of the most infamous events was the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in 1572. Thousands of Huguenots were killed in Paris, and the violence spread to other parts of France. The violence and instability had devastating effects on the country. Economically, France was in shambles, and socially, the country was deeply divided. The conflict also drew in other European powers like Spain and England, who had their own interests in the outcome. A major turning point in the conflict came with the rise of Henry of Navarre, a Huguenot leader who eventually became King Henry IV of France. Henry's ascension wasn't a smooth one. He had to fight his way to the throne, and he famously converted to Catholicism to gain the support of the majority, reportedly saying, "Paris is worth a mass." In 1598, Henry IV issued the Edict of Nantes, which granted significant rights to the Huguenots and effectively ended the war. It was a compromise meant to bring peace to a war-torn country. While it didn't solve all the underlying religious and social problems, it did bring relative peace that lasted until the edict was revoked in 1685. It is estimated that around 3 million people died as a result of the conflict from battles, massacres, famine, and disease. The sheer scale of the devastation makes it one of the darkest chapters in French history. The Deluge. The Deluge, also known as the Swedish Deluge, was a series of mid-17th century wars involving the Polish-Lithuanian crown and several invading forces, most notably Sweden. It lasted from 1655 to 1660 and caused widespread destruction and suffering in the region. Sweden under King Charles X Gustav was looking to expand his territory and influence in northern Europe, particularly in the Baltic Sea. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, weakened by internal conflicts and wars with other neighbors, became an attractive target to the Swedish crown. The Swedish invasion began in 1655, and it was swift but brutal. The Swedes, known for their military efficiency, quickly captured large parts of the Commonwealth. They occupied major cities like Warsaw, Krakow, and their advance seemed unstoppable. But it wasn't just the Swedes causing troubles for the Polish-Lithuanian crown. The Russians, the Transylvanians, and the Cossacks also took advantage of the chaos to attack the Commonwealth. It was a perfect storm of invasions that left the country in ruins. Though the Deluge wasn't just a series of battles, though. It was a period of widespread devastation. Entire towns were destroyed, and the civilian population suffered immensely. The occupation forces looted, burned, and committed atrocities against the Polish people. It's estimated that the population of the Commonwealth was reduced by 1/3 during this period. Despite the odds, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth eventually managed to pull through and turn the tide. King John II Casimir, along with the loyal nobles and resilient population, organized a resistance. Key battles like the defense of Jasna Góra monastery became symbols of the Polish defiance and determination. By 1660, the tide had turned in favor of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and the Treaty of Alava was signed, ending the Swedish invasion. The Commonwealth managed to survive, but it was left severely weakened. The Deluge had long-lasting effects, crippling the Polish-Lithuanian economy, depopulating large areas, and leaving deep scars on the society. The scale of destruction was quite immense with the Deluge, with millions of people dying from battles, famine, and disease. The war also left a lasting impact on the region's demographics and political landscape.